The desert is silent before dawn. Wind moves softly across the sand, brushing against ancient stone that has watched the sky for nearly 5,000 years. As the sun begins to rise, its light spills across a strange horizon. Pyramids that look familiar, yet somehow unfinished, experimental, almost uncertain. These are not the famous monuments of Giza. These are the pyramids of Sneferu. Before Egypt perfected eternity in stone, before the Great Pyramid pierced the heavens, there was one king who dared to fail again and again in pursuit of something immortal. His name was Sneferu, and he was not merely a builder of pyramids, he was the man who invented them. In an age when kings were still learning how to become gods, Sneferu imagined monuments unlike anything the world had seen. Smooth-sided mountains of limestone, engineered not just to honor death, but to conquer it. His reign would be marked by ambition, collapse, reinvention, and ultimate triumph. 3 pyramids would rise under his command. One would fail, one would bend, one would finally stand, perfect and true. This is the story of a king who refused to accept limits, a ruler who transformed disaster into knowledge, and a visionary whose experiments shaped the skyline of eternity. This is the story of Sneferu, the pyramid builder king. Before Sneferu reshaped the horizon of Egypt, the land of the Nile stood at a crossroads between tradition and transformation. For centuries, the dead were buried in mastabas, low, flat-roofed tombs made of mud brick or stone, practical and symbolic, but modest in their reach toward eternity. These structures reflected an older vision of the afterlife, one rooted in the earth rather than the sky. The reign of King Djoser had marked the first great leap forward. His step pyramid at Saqqara, designed by the brilliant Imhotep, rose in stacked layers, a stairway of stone meant to lift the king toward the heavens. It was revolutionary, Egypt's first monumental structure built entirely of stone. But it was still an experiment. The pyramid was not yet smooth, not yet the perfect geometric form that would come to define Egypt itself. After Djoser, uncertainty returned. Kings inherited the idea of monumental tombs, but not the mastery to improve them. Builders struggled with weight, balance, and scale. Stone was heavy, unforgiving, and poorly understood. Each new structure carried risk. A single miscalculation could turn a royal dream into rubble. Religiously, Egypt was also evolving. The sun god Ra was rising in importance, and with him came new ideas about kingship. Pharaohs were no longer just rulers on earth. They were divine beings whose souls needed a clear path to the sky. Tombs were no longer simply houses for the dead. They were machines of resurrection. This was the world Sneferu inherited, a civilization filled with ambition but haunted by uncertainty. Egypt knew greatness was possible, yet lacked the knowledge to achieve it consistently. The dream of a perfect pyramid existed, but it remained just that, a dream carved in sketches and faith rather than proven stone. Into this fragile moment stepped Sneferu, a king who would turn experimentation into mastery and uncertainty into legacy. Sneferu was born into a kingdom standing on the edge of transformation. His birth came in the closing years of the Third Dynasty, a time when Egypt had tasted greatness but had not yet learned how to sustain it. The monumental vision of King Djoser still loomed over the land, casting a long shadow across the royal court. Stone had been conquered once, but only once, and no one yet knew how to repeat that miracle. The prince's early life unfolded within palace walls, filled with ritual, discipline, and expectation. From the moment of his birth, Sneferu was surrounded by symbols of divine authority. Priests recited ancient hymns, invoking the gods to protect the child destined to rule. Astrologers watched the stars, reading signs in the heavens for clues about the boy's fate. To the people of Egypt, the birth of a royal son was never ordinary. It was a cosmic event. As a young prince, Sneferu was educated in the sacred traditions of kingship. He learned the laws of Maat, the balance that held the universe together. He studied religion, administration, and the art of command. Yet beyond scrolls and ceremonies, Sneferu grew up in a world shaped by unfinished ambition. He saw great monuments weathering under time, their limits exposed by gravity and stone. Stories of Djoser's step pyramid were told not as distant legend, but as living memory. Builders, priests, and officials spoke of triumph and risk in equal measure. Sneferu listened. He learned that greatness was not guaranteed, even for a king. In this environment, the prince's character was formed. He inherited not a perfected system, but a question. Could Egypt go further? Could stone be shaped not only into steps, but into perfection itself? The child born under these uncertain skies would one day answer that question, not with words, but with mountains of stone that would redefine eternity. As Sneferu grew from prince to young man, one presence loomed constantly over his world, the towering legacy of King Djoser. The step pyramid at Saqqara was more than a monument. It was a reminder of what had been achieved only once and never repeated. Its massive stone tiers dominated the desert, a frozen staircase rising toward the heavens, whispering both promise and warning. For Sneferu, Djoser was not a distant ancestor lost to myth. He was a standard impossible to ignore. Court officials, priests, and architects still spoke his name with reverence, crediting him as the king who first turned stone into eternity. At the heart of those stories stood Imhotep, the architect whose genius seemed unmatched. Together, they had done what no one before them had dared, build a monument not of mud brick, but of enduring stone. Yet beneath the admiration lay uncertainty. No king after Djoser had managed to surpass or even truly replicate his achievement. Attempts at large stone structures stalled or failed. Builders lacked confidence, and royal ambition was restrained by fear of collapse and disgrace. The step pyramid stood alone, not as the beginning of an age, but as a solitary miracle. Sneferu absorbed this tension. He studied the pyramid not only as a symbol of greatness, but as a problem waiting to be solved. Why had no one improved upon it? Why had innovation stopped? In the quiet moments of observation, he saw its strengths and its limitations. The stepped form was powerful, yet incomplete. It reached upward, but it did not yet embody perfection. To step out of Djoser's shadow, Sneferu would need more than imitation. He would need courage to risk failure where others hesitated. The weight of history pressed heavily upon him, but it also sharpened his resolve. The step pyramid did not intimidate Sneferu, it challenged him. And in its long shadow, the future pyramid builder Pin began to imagine something greater. A monument not built in steps, but in flawless lines, smooth and eternal, worthy of the gods themselves. The day Sneferu became king, Egypt held its breath. The passing of the old ruler marked more than the end of a reign. It signaled a moment of uncertainty for the entire kingdom. Power in ancient Egypt was sacred, but it was also fragile, dependent on balance, order, and the favor of the gods. When the crown was placed upon Sneferu's head, he inherited not only authority, but expectation. The coronation rituals were ancient and precise. Priests purified the young king with sacred water from the Nile, symbolizing rebirth. He was presented with the royal crowns, the crook and flail, and the titles that transformed a man into a living god. From that moment forward, Sneferu was no longer simply human. He was the embodiment of Horus on earth, responsible for maintaining Ma'at, the divine balance of the universe. Yet behind the ceremony lay a deeper challenge. Sneferu ascended the throne at the dawn of the Fourth Dynasty, a new era that demanded legitimacy. Dynastic transitions were dangerous times when rival claims and regional unrest could fracture the land. Sneferu had to prove quickly that his rule was favored by the gods and supported by strength. He moved decisively. Officials loyal to the crown were confirmed in their positions, while provincial governors were reminded of their obligations. Resources were reorganized, and Egypt's wealth, grain, stone, labor, and manpower was brought firmly under royal control. Stability returned, and with it, confidence. But Sneferu's vision reached beyond politics. He understood that a king's greatness would be measured not only by peace, but what he left behind in stone. The crown gave him the power to command Egypt's future, but also the responsibility to define it. As the crown settled upon his brow, Sneferu did not look backward in fear. He looked forward, toward the desert, toward the horizon, and toward monuments that would declare his reign eternal. With the crown secure upon his head and Egypt stabilized under his rule, Sneferu turned his thoughts toward something no king before him had fully achieved, a vision of perfection in stone. He was not satisfied with simply ruling Egypt. He intended to redefine what kingship itself looked like. In Sneferu's mind, power was not meant to fade with memory. It was meant to endure, carved into the earth itself. Standing at the edge of the desert, Sneferu imagined a monument unlike any before it. The step pyramid had been revolutionary, but it still bore the marks of experimentation. Its layered form suggested progress, yet it also revealed hesitation. Sneferu envisioned something purer, clean lines rising smoothly from the ground, a perfect geometric shape reflecting cosmic order, a pyramid not built in steps, but in flawless symmetry. This vision was deeply religious. The cult of the sun god Ra was growing in influence, and Sneferu embraced it fully. A smooth-sided pyramid, gleaming under the sun, would act as a sacred ramp, allowing the king's soul to ascend directly into the heavens. The pyramid would not merely house his body, it would transform him, merging king and god in eternal light. But Sneferu's dream was also dangerously bold. No one had ever constructed such a structure. The engineering challenges were immense: weight distribution, stone quality, foundation stability. Every unknown carried the risk of disaster. Advisors urged caution. Priests warned against angering the gods through hubris. Sneferu listened, but he did not retreat. He understood that innovation demanded risk. To remain safe was to remain small, and Sneferu had no intention of being remembered as a cautious king. His vision demanded experimentation, learning, and perseverance. In that moment, Sneferu became something more than a ruler. He became a pioneer. The desert before him was empty, silent, and unforgiving, but in his mind, it was already filled with mountains of stone that would change history forever. To turn vision into stone, Sneferu needed more than imagination. He needed absolute power. Monumental building on the scale he envisioned demanded unprecedented control over Egypt's people, resources, and administration. Sneferu understood this clearly. Before pyramids could rise, authority had to be unquestioned. As king, Sneferu moved to strengthen the central government. Provincial governors, known as nomarchs, were brought firmly under royal supervision. Their loyalty was no longer assumed, it was enforced through appointments, audits, and direct oversight from the royal court. Egypt was unified not just by tradition, but by administration. Orders flowed outward from the capital like the Nile itself, steady and unstoppable. Sneferu reorganized labor on a scale never seen before. Farmers, craftsmen, engineers, scribes, and laborers were registered, supplied, and rotated seasonally. During the Nile's annual flood, when fields lay underwater, tens of thousands of workers could be mobilized for state projects. This was not slavery, but obligation, service to the divine king who maintained cosmic order. In return, workers were fed, housed, and honored as participants in a sacred mission. Control of resources was equally vital. Quarries were claimed in the king's name: limestone from Tura, granite from Aswan, timber from distant lands. Nothing moved without royal command. Scribes recorded every shipment, every ration, every stone block, transforming power into paperwork and vision into logistics. This system revealed Sneferu's true strength. He was not merely a dreamer of monuments, he was a master organizer. His authority reached from the throne room to the quarry face, from priestly rituals to engineering decisions. By forging a state capable of such coordination, Sneferu reshaped Egypt itself. The pyramids would stand as symbols of stone, but beneath them lay something just as enduring: the machinery of royal power that made the impossible possible. Stone became the voice of Sneferu's ambition. Across Egypt, the king's command echoed through the cliffs and riverbanks where the raw bones of the land lay exposed. For the first time in history, quarrying was no longer a supporting craft. It was the heartbeat of a royal vision. The age of monumental stone had truly begun. Limestone quarries along the Nile roared to life. At Tura, fine white stone was cut from the cliffs, prized for its smooth surface and luminous glow beneath the sun. Further south, at Aswan, granite was wrestled from the earth, hard, unyielding, and sacred, destined for chambers meant to last forever. Each block removed from the rock face represented hours of labor, careful planning, and absolute precision. The work was relentless. Teams of laborers chiseled stone with copper tools, pounding wooden wedges into cracks, soaking them with water until the rock split apart. Scribes watched closely, recording quantities, quality, and destination. Nothing was wasted. Every block had a purpose, a place, and a future in the king's eternal house. Transportation was a challenge equal to extraction. Stone was hauled on sledges across the desert, lubricated with water to reduce friction. At the Nile, massive blocks were loaded onto barges and floated downstream, carried by the river that bound Egypt together. The journey from quarry to construction site could take weeks, even months, yet it never stopped. This was more than construction, it was transformation. Entire regions shifted to serve the pyramid projects. Villages grew around quarry sites. Supply routes hardened into permanent arteries of the state. Stone reshaped not only the landscape, but the economy and rhythm of daily life. For Sneferu, stone was no longer just material. It was obedience made solid, faith carved into weight, and time itself pressed into shape. Egypt had answered the call, and the desert would soon remember it forever. After consolidating his power and rallying the labor of Egypt, Sneferu faced a critical decision. Where would his first Great Pyramid rise? The choice of location was far from arbitrary. It needed to reflect both the king's divine authority and the practicality of construction. After careful consideration, Sneferu selected Meidum, a site south of Memphis, surrounded by open desert, yet close to the Nile for transportation. It was here that the first step toward perfection would begin. Meidum offered several advantages. The ground was solid and elevated, capable of supporting a massive stone structure. Its proximity to quarries meant limestone could be transported with relative ease. The open space allowed for unbroken lines of sight, a crucial factor for a project that relied on precision and alignment with the stars. For Sneferu, the site was not just practical, it symbolized ambition, stretching the horizon beyond previous constructions. Yet Meidum also presented risks. The desert wind could shift the sand, and the terrain required careful leveling to ensure stability. Mistakes here could be catastrophic. But Sneferu embraced the challenge. He saw the site not as a limitation, but as a proving ground for Egypt's growing mastery of stone. Once the decision was made, the king oversaw every step of preparation. Foundations were measured and laid with exacting care. Surveyors used ropes and plumb bobs to create perfect lines. Laborers constructed ramps and roads to deliver the enormous limestone blocks from nearby quarries. Every detail was deliberate, each step a rehearsal for the larger, more ambitious pyramids to come. Choosing Meidum marked the first tangible act of Sneferu's pyramid-building era. It was more than a location, it was the beginning of a journey from experimentation to mastery, a testament to a king who would not accept limits in his pursuit of immortality. The desert at Meidum would soon echo with the sounds of ambition, stone, and history being made. At Meidum, the desert hummed with activity as thousands of workers, architects, and craftsmen transformed plans into reality. Sneferu's vision began to take shape, stone by stone, rising from the flat sands like a defiant monument to eternity. What started as a step pyramid, a familiar form from earlier dynasties, soon began to stretch higher, reflecting the king's desire to surpass his predecessors. The foundation was laid with meticulous care. Surveyors checked each level against the stars, aligning the structure precisely to the cardinal points. Limestone blocks quarried from nearby hills were hauled over ramps with sheer human effort, sliding on sledges greased with water to ease their weight. Every corner, every layer demanded coordination, discipline, and oversight. This was not just construction, it was the orchestration of an entire kingdom toward a single, monumental goal. Sneferu watched the progress closely, visiting the site to inspect measurements and offer guidance. Priests blessed the work, invoking the gods to protect the king and his project. Laborers sang, chiseled, and lifted under the desert sun, their toil both an offering and a duty. The pyramid began to rise steadily, its stepped form becoming a symbol of ambition and divine aspiration. Yet, even as the Meidum Pyramid climbed, the risks of experimentation were clear. Stone was heavy and unforgiving. Slight miscalculations could lead to disaster. But Sneferu's determination and oversight ensured progress, turning uncertainty into achievement. By the time the structure neared completion, it already towered over the surrounding plains, a bold statement of Sneferu's vision and power. The Meidum Pyramid was not yet perfect, but it marked a critical first step toward the smooth-sided pyramids that would define his reign. It was here, amid dust, sweat, and stone, that Egypt began to learn how to reach for the heavens. The desert at Meidum had been conquered, at least for now. As the Meidum Pyramid neared completion, Sneferu faced a daunting challenge. What had begun as a traditional step pyramid now demanded something more ambitious, a transformation into a smooth-sided, true pyramid. This was a daring experiment, unprecedented in Egyptian history, and it carried enormous risk. The very shape of the structure had to be altered mid-construction, a decision that could either immortalize the king's vision or collapse into disaster. Engineers and architects gathered under Sneferu's supervision. They debated angles, weights, and foundations, aware that every change could destabilize thousands of tons of stone. The lower steps, already laid with painstaking precision, were now the base for an entirely new design. Adjustments had to be made carefully, using ramps and scaffolding to add layers that would gradually smooth the exterior. Laborers worked with tense precision, lifting massive blocks into place while balancing them on the existing steps. Every addition had to align perfectly with the modified angle. One misstep could trigger a catastrophic collapse. Sneferu himself visited the site repeatedly, observing the process, giving instructions, and insisting that nothing be rushed. His presence was both reassurance and pressure. The king's authority underscored the stakes of this transformation. Despite the risk, the work advanced. Slowly, the stepped tiers began to disappear beneath sloping layers of limestone. The pyramid's shape evolved before the eyes of workers, priests, and officials into something bold and extraordinary. The bent pyramid, a testament to adaptation and ambition. This risky transformation marked a turning point. It demonstrated that failure could be instructive, that even massive miscalculations could be corrected with courage, ingenuity, and persistence. Sneferu's willingness to push boundaries would define his reign. In the desert at Meidum, stone was not just shaped by hands, it was shaped by vision, risk, and the unyielding determination of a king unwilling to accept limits. The bent pyramid's strange silhouette would stand for millennia, a reminder that great innovation always demands risk. The ambitious transformation of the Meidum Pyramid was a marvel in progress, but ambition has a fragile partner: risk. As workers labored to smooth the stepped layers into a true pyramid, the unthinkable happened. The structure, already towering over the desert, began to show signs of instability. Cracks appeared along the outer layers. The weight of the stone, combined with adjustments made mid-construction, pushed the foundation to its limits. At first, the shifts were subtle, small creaks and dust falling from the edges, but soon entire sections of the upper layers collapsed, tumbling in massive clouds of sand and limestone. Laborers scrambled, trying to secure the remaining stones, but the damage was catastrophic. The pyramid, once a beacon of Sneferu's vision, now lay in partial ruin. Stepped layers were exposed, and the dream of a flawless, smooth-sided monument seemed shattered. Sneferu, watching from a distance, faced a critical moment as king. To most rulers, such a disaster would have been a humiliating defeat, a signal to abandon grand ambitions. But Sneferu approached the collapse differently. Rather than conceal failure or retreat in fear, he examined the collapse, consulted with his engineers, and sought to understand precisely why the massive stones had failed. Every crack and fallen block became a lesson in weight, angle, and stability. The ruined Meidum Pyramid stood as a harsh teacher, but it did not break the king's resolve. Sneferu's vision remained intact, Only the method needed refinement. In the desert silence, the fallen stones whispered the limits of experimentation, yet they also offered the blueprint for mastery. This catastrophe, terrifying as it was, became the foundation for Sneferu's next triumphs, the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid, where knowledge born from failure would transform ambition into enduring glory. The Meidum collapse proved a timeless truth. Even in ruin, there is wisdom for those who dare to learn. The Meidum Pyramid lay in shattered silence, a skeletal monument of fallen ambition. Dust and limestone fragments scattered across the desert, evidence of a king's daring experiment gone awry. To any ordinary ruler, such a scene would have been the bitter end of a vision. But for Sneferu, the rubble was not a failure, it was a teacher. Each fallen stone, each collapsed layer, carried a lesson written in weight, angle, and geometry. Sneferu walked among the ruins, inspecting the wreckage with the eyes of both king and architect. Engineers and scribes accompanied him, taking notes, measuring angles, and discussing where the structure had buckled under its own mass. The collapse revealed truths that could not have been learned from plans or theory alone. How heavy could a single block be before it shifted? At what angle would limestone hold its form against gravity? Which construction methods were stable and which were fatally flawed? These questions became the foundation for innovation. Sneferu understood that progress often demands confrontation with failure. The Meidum disaster taught him about the dangers of overambition without adjustment, the necessity of proper angles, and the critical importance of a solid foundation. From the rubble, he drew practical solutions, altering slope angles, improving base preparation, and refining labor coordination. Beyond the technical lessons, the collapse imparted a deeper insight about leadership. A king's greatness is measured not by the monuments he completes without challenge, but by his ability to learn from mistakes, adapt, and rise stronger. Sneferu embodied this principle fully. By turning ruin into knowledge, the fallen stones of Meidum became more than debris. They became the blueprint for future triumphs. Sneferu's vision survived the collapse, strengthened by the lessons the desert had written in rubble. In failure, he found the path to mastery, and the echo of those lessons would shape the pyramids of eternity. Even as the Meidum Pyramid lay in ruin, Sneferu did not falter. For many rulers, such a disaster would have signaled the end of ambition, a moment to retreat and preserve pride. But Sneferu's vision was larger than fear. He understood that mastery required persistence, that greatness was forged not in comfort, but in the face of obstacles that tested courage, intellect, and will. The king quickly turned his attention from failure to opportunity. Engineers were summoned from across Egypt, and scribes recorded every observation about the collapse. Laborers were retrained, ramps rebuilt, and stone carefully reevaluated. Sneferu refused to let the lessons of Meidum go unused. Instead, the catastrophe became the foundation for the next, even bolder pyramid, the Bent Pyramid at Dashur. Sneferu's determination inspired those around him. Craftsmen and quarry workers, once discouraged by the fallen blocks, now labored with renewed purpose. Priests blessed the project, framing it as a sacred act of devotion and resilience. Nobles brought resources and manpower, understanding that the king's ambition was inseparable from Egypt's destiny. Every act of perseverance reinforced the king's authority. To follow Sneferu was to follow courage itself. This period marked a shift in Egypt's approach to monumental building. Experimentation became acceptable, even celebrated, because failure was no longer shame, it was a teacher. Sneferu's unrelenting drive ensured that Egypt learned faster, adapted smarter, and dreamed higher. By refusing to stop, Sneferu transformed tragedy into momentum. The ruins of Meidum were not merely a cautionary tale, they were the springboard for architectural innovation. His unwavering vision proved that a king's power is measured not just by successes, but by the audacity to continue when the world seems to crumble. In the desert of Dashur, stone and ambition would soon rise again, stronger, wiser, and closer to perfection. After the lessons of Meidum, Sneferu knew that choosing the right site for his next pyramid was as critical as the design itself. He required a location that could support a massive stone structure, one that would rise higher and bolder than anything attempted before. His gaze fell south of Memphis to the desert plateau of Dashur, an area of open space, firm ground, and proximity to the Nile for transporting stone. It was here that Sneferu would take the next daring step in his pursuit of immortality. Dashur offered more than practicality. The site's elevated terrain and stable bedrock promised a foundation capable of holding enormous weight, reducing the risks that had plagued Meidum. Its wide, flat expanse allowed architects to experiment with innovative slopes and alignments, laying the groundwork for the bent pyramid and later the red pyramid. Surveyors could set precise cardinal orientations, linking the monument to the cosmos in a manner that reflected Egypt's growing devotion to the sun god Ra. Sneferu's choice was also symbolic. By moving south, he signaled a new era of architectural ambition, leaving behind the failures of Meidum without abandoning them. Dashur became both a testing ground and a statement, a place where the king would turn lessons into triumph. Once the decision was made, preparation began immediately. Foundations were carefully leveled and surveyed, ramps were constructed, and quarries were assigned to supply the enormous quantities of limestone and granite required. Laborers, engineers, and priests converged at the site, ready to transform desert into eternity. Dashur was more than a location. It was the canvas for Sneferu's vision, a place where knowledge, ambition, and divine purpose would converge. In this barren desert, the pyramid builder king would once again challenge the limits of stone, design, and human endurance, shaping monuments that would stand for millennia. At Dashur, Sneferu's vision began to take form once more, ambitious and audacious. This would be no ordinary pyramid. It would be a monument unlike any the world had seen, a smooth-sided structure designed to reach the heavens. Construction commenced with thousands of laborers, engineers, and craftsmen converging on the desert plateau. Every stone laid was a statement of purpose, every measurement a testament to human ingenuity. The foundation was meticulously prepared, leveled with precision to support the immense weight that would rise above it. Surveyors aligned the base perfectly with the cardinal points, ensuring the pyramid's connection to the cosmic order, a reflection of the divine. Limestone blocks were cut from nearby quarries, while granite from Aswan was reserved for the inner chambers to be fitted with unparalleled accuracy. Sneferu oversaw every stage, inspecting progress and directing modifications as needed, his presence both inspiring and exacting. As the structure climbed, the scale of the project became breathtaking. Workers hauled enormous stones up massive ramps, coordinating lifts and placements with incredible precision. Priests performed rituals to bless the endeavor, calling on Ra and other gods to protect both king and monument. The desert echoed with the sounds of chisels, chants, and human determination. Yet, as the pyramid rose, the limits of early engineering became apparent. Midway through construction, cracks in the outer layers signaled stress in the foundation. Builders and architects convened under Sneferu's guidance, debating adjustments. In a bold and unprecedented decision, they altered the slope of the upper sections, reducing the angle to prevent collapse. Thus, the bent pyramid was born, a unique hybrid form, its lower half steep and daring, the upper half gentler and safer. Though imperfect in shape, it represented the triumph of adaptation and innovation, a living testament to a king who refused to let failure dictate his destiny. In stone, Sneferu's vision endured, bending but never breaking. As the bent pyramid rose from the sands of Dashur, Sneferu's ambition reached new heights. Every block laid, every slope adjusted, tested the limits of both human skill and the raw power of stone. This was not merely construction, it was an experiment in engineering on a scale the world had never seen. Sneferu was determined to see how far Egypt could push its knowledge, to discover the boundaries between possibility and catastrophe. The pyramid's lower sections soared at a daringly steep angle, each layer of limestone weighing tons and requiring careful coordination. Ramps were extended and reinforced, ropes and sledges straining under the enormous loads. Craftsmen chiseled with precision, laborers hauled stones with relentless effort, and overseers ensured that every block fit perfectly within the evolving structure. The desert became a living laboratory where every challenge demanded ingenuity, adjustment, and endurance. Even as the pyramid climbed, the risks were clear. Stress on the foundation increased with height, and slight miscalculations could trigger collapse. Sneferu himself monitored the progress closely, making real-time decisions to adjust the slope, redistribute weight, and reinforce vulnerable sections. This willingness to confront uncertainty head-on was what set him apart as a ruler and innovator. The bent pyramid's final form reflected these adaptations, a strikingly steep lower half that boldly reached skyward, transitioning midway to a gentler angle at the top. Its unusual shape is a record of experimentation, a monument to both ambition and prudence. In pushing the limits of architecture, Sneferu not only advanced Egypt's technical mastery, but also redefined what a king could achieve. The bent pyramid was more than a tomb. It was a testament to human courage, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. Every stone placed was proof that greatness often lies beyond the boundaries of comfort and certainty. As the bent pyramid continued to rise, it became clear that Sneferu's daring design carried hidden dangers. The steep lower angle that gave the structure its dramatic presence also placed enormous stress on the foundation and lower tiers. Cracks began to appear along the outer casing, subtle at first, but growing steadily under the weight of thousands of tons of stone. For a king who sought perfection, this was a crisis demanding immediate attention. Engineers and architects gathered under Sneferu's supervision to assess the damage. They examined the cracks, measured the shifting layers, and debated the causes. Was it the angle of ascent, the quality of limestone, or the cumulative weight? Each factor demanded careful consideration because a single miscalculation could undo years of labor. Sneferu observed every discussion, balancing authority with insight, demonstrating the wisdom that would make him a legendary builder. The cracks were not merely structural, they were a test of leadership. Sneferu's response would determine not only the survival of the pyramid, but also the morale of the workforce and the credibility of the kingdom. He ordered adjustments to the slope, reinforcing vulnerable sections and recalibrating construction methods to distribute the weight more evenly. Additional ramps were built, stones were repositioned, and the laborers worked with heightened vigilance. This critical moment transformed the pyramid from a bold experiment into a model of adaptation. Sneferu's willingness to confront flaws head-on allowed engineers to learn in real time, turning potential disaster into a path toward mastery. The cracks in the design, once a threat, became a guide, a lesson in physics, patience, and perseverance. In the end, the bent pyramid stood not as a flawless creation, but as a testament to the king's courage and ingenuity. Sneferu's vision survived the cracks, proving that innovation often requires embracing imperfection while striving relentlessly for greatness. As the bent pyramid rose, the situation reached a critical juncture. The steep lower slopes, ambitious and daring, had begun to show signs of stress, and cracks along the stonework grew more pronounced with every layer added. Sneferu, standing on the edge of his monumental vision, faced a defining moment. Every decision from this point forward could mean the triumph of Egyptian architecture or its catastrophic failure. The king called together his chief architects, engineers, and overseers. They gathered around the half-built structure, measuring angles, inspecting the cracks, and debating solutions. The options were stark: continue as planned and risk collapse, or alter the pyramid's design mid-construction. Both choices carried weighty consequences. To change the angle would be unprecedented. No pyramid in Egypt had ever been modified in this way. To proceed without adjustment risked losing years of labor and the king's reputation. Sneferu weighed the counsel of his advisors against his own vision. He walked among the workers, observing the strain on ramps, the alignment of the blocks, the subtle shifts in the desert sand beneath the foundation. He understood that the survival of the pyramid and the legacy of his reign depended on a bold, decisive choice. With unwavering determination, Sneferu made his decision. The upper portion would be reduced, softening the angle to relieve stress on the lower tiers. Engineers immediately began recalculating, adjusting measurements, and guiding laborers in placing the remaining stones along the new trajectory. This moment defined the bent pyramid. It was a triumph not just of construction, but of leadership, ingenuity, and courage. Sneferu's ability to adapt, to confront uncertainty with decisive action, transformed potential disaster into achievement. The pyramid would stand, a symbol of resilience, innovation, and the king's refusal to let failure dictate the course of history. In this desert, a king had chosen wisely, and Egypt would never forget. After years of relentless labor, adaptation, and innovation, the bent pyramid at Dashur finally stood complete. Its unusual form, a steep lower section transitioning to a gentler upper slope, rose boldly from the desert sands, silhouetted against the sun. For all its imperfections, it was a triumph of vision, engineering, and leadership, a physical testament to Sneferu's audacity and ingenuity. The pyramid's reveal was more than the completion of a building. It was the culmination of a process that had tested the king, his architects, and his workers. Dust still hung in the air, stirred by the final positioning of the massive limestone blocks, and the sound of chisels faded as craftsmen stepped back to witness their creation. Sneferu himself ascended the ramps, walking along the terraces, inspecting each level with a proud but careful eye. He saw the result of lessons learned from Meidum, adjustments in angle, reinforced foundations, and precise placement of every stone. Priests performed rituals to consecrate the monument, calling upon Ra and other deities to bless the pyramid and ensure the king's eternal journey to the heavens. Workers and officials watched with reverence, understanding that they had participated in something unprecedented. The bent pyramid was not merely a tomb, it was a symbol of Egypt's growing mastery over stone, labor, and time itself. The pyramid's strange silhouette fascinated onlookers and would perplex future generations of architects. Yet it was precisely this imperfection that made it extraordinary. It told a story of experimentation, adaptation, and courage, a record of a king who dared to push boundaries and learn from failure. As the sun set behind Dashur, the bent pyramid cast a long shadow across the desert. It was a monument of resilience, a testament to human ingenuity, and a promise. Sneferu's vision would not end here. Egypt had learned to dream higher, and the age of smooth-sided pyramids had only just begun. The bent pyramid stood as a strange yet magnificent monument, a structure both daring and imperfect. Its unusual form, a steep lower half and a gentler upper slope, was a visible reminder of the risks Sneferu had taken and the lessons learned through trial and error. For a king who sought perfection, this apparent imperfection was not a failure, but a blueprint for innovation. Sneferu understood that true mastery comes from confronting challenges, analyzing mistakes, and applying that knowledge to future projects. The cracks at Meidum, the adjustments at Dashur, and the careful recalibrations of the bent pyramid itself had all taught Egypt how stone behaves under massive weight, how angles affect stability, and how construction methods could be refined. Each misstep had transformed into invaluable insight. This period marked a revolution in engineering. Architects now calculated loads with unprecedented precision. Laborers moved stone blocks with greater coordination and care. Foundations were laid deeper, ramps were constructed more strategically, and alignment with the cardinal points became exact. Innovation was no longer theoretical, it was a practice born from experience, observation, and courage. Beyond engineering, Sneferu's approach influenced leadership itself. By embracing failure as a teacher, he inspired his officials, engineers, and workers to experiment, learn, and improve. Fear of mistakes no longer held back ambition. The king's resilience became the guiding principle for every monumental endeavor in Egypt, proving that setbacks were merely stepping stones toward greatness. The bent pyramid, though imperfect in shape, embodied this philosophy. It was a living classroom in the desert, teaching lessons that would culminate in the Red Pyramid and later in the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Sneferu's willingness to innovate through failure transformed Egypt's understanding of architecture and left a legacy that would endure for millennia, a timeless lesson that ambition and learning are inseparable. Sneferu's reign was defined not only by vision, but by an unbreakable will that turned ambition into reality. The bent pyramid had tested every skill, every resource, and every ounce of patience the king possessed. Yet, even after years of labor, countless obstacles, and the shadow of past failures at Meidum, Sneferu remained undeterred. For him, limits were challenges to be overcome, not barriers to halt progress. The desert at Dashur had become a proving ground for the king's determination. Engineers debated, laborers strained under the sun, and priests recited prayers to bless the endeavor. But all knew that the project would succeed only because Sneferu would not allow it to fail. His presence on the construction site was constant. He inspected foundations, checked angles, and personally oversaw the placement of massive limestone blocks. Workers were inspired and disciplined by his resolve. Seeing the king's focus and perseverance instilled confidence that no obstacle was insurmountable. Sneferu's will extended beyond mere oversight. He refused to let setbacks dictate the pace or ambition of his projects. The lessons of Meidum and the bent pyramid informed every decision, but they did not diminish his audacity. If anything, they sharpened it, teaching him how to balance bold vision with careful adaptation. This unyielding determination defined his legacy. Sneferu was more than a king. He was a force of nature, shaping stone, labor, and knowledge alike to achieve his monumental goals. The bent pyramid, strange in form yet monumental in scale, stood as a testament to his perseverance. In every line of stone, every carefully measured angle, the desert bore witness to Sneferu's resolve. He had proven that true greatness arises not only from vision or resources, but from a will strong enough to bend failure itself to the service of eternity.
After years of experimentation, adaptation, and monumental labor, Sneferu was ready for one final attempt, a pyramid that would combine all the lessons of Meidum and the bent pyramid into a flawless, enduring monument. This was not merely another construction project, it was the culmination of a king's vision, a testament to his unyielding ambition, and a bold statement that Egypt could master stone, geometry, and eternity itself. Sneferu approached the task with unmatched determination. The site at Dashur was carefully chosen once again, its foundations meticulously surveyed and reinforced. Engineers studied every previous mistake, calculating angles, load distribution, and stone quality with unparalleled precision. Laborers were organized in well-trained teams, familiar with the rhythms and techniques honed through years of prior projects. Every block of limestone and granite was measured, transported, and positioned with extraordinary care. The king's presence was constant, a steady hand guiding every stage. Priests blessed the work, calling upon Ra and the other gods to ensure divine protection, while officials recorded progress in careful detail. Sneferu's vision was clear. This pyramid would not bend, it would not fail, and it would endure for eternity. From the first layer of stone to the rising apex, the pyramid's construction was a symphony of coordination, knowledge, and persistence. Every challenge, weight, alignment, stability, was met with careful adaptation, informed by decades of trial and error. For Sneferu, failure was no longer a possibility, but a lesson already mastered. This final attempt was more than architecture. It was the embodiment of a king's legacy. In choosing to build again, Sneferu demonstrated that courage, wisdom, and determination could overcome any obstacle. The desert would soon hold a monument that was both perfect and eternal, a fitting crown to the life of Egypt's greatest pyramid builder king. Sneferu's last attempt was not just a project, it was the triumph of vision made real in stone. After the lessons of Meidum and the bent pyramid, Sneferu was ready to attempt something unprecedented, a pyramid built flawlessly from start to finish. This would become the Red Pyramid, named for the warm reddish limestone that would eventually cover its smooth slopes. Unlike his previous projects, there would be no experimental angles, no halfway adjustments. This pyramid would rise perfectly, embodying everything Sneferu had learned from failure, observation, and adaptation. Construction began with meticulous planning. The foundations at Dashur were leveled with extreme precision, reinforced to bear the enormous weight of stone above. Engineers calculated the exact slope that would ensure stability while still achieving grandeur.
The labor force, now highly experienced from decades of pyramid building, was organized into specialized teams: quarrying, transport, precision placement, and internal chamber construction. Even the timing of work was coordinated with the Nile's annual flood, ensuring maximum efficiency and minimal disruption. Massive limestone blocks were cut from nearby quarries and transported on sledges to the site, lubricated with water to reduce friction. Granite from Aswan was reserved for the king's burial chambers, carefully shaped and transported hundreds of miles. Surveyors and scribes recorded every block, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. Sneferu himself monitored progress, walking the ramps, inspecting alignment, and giving instructions to both workers and overseers. His presence reminded everyone that this pyramid was not just stone, it was the embodiment of the king's divine authority and vision. The Red Pyramid represented a turning point in Egyptian architecture. For the first time, a smooth-sided pyramid would be completed without major structural compromise. It symbolized not only Sneferu's mastery of engineering, but also his unyielding determination to achieve perfection. The desert at Dashur would soon hold a monument of true harmony, marking the culmination of a king's lifelong quest to conquer stone, time, and eternity itself. With the Red Pyramid underway, Sneferu focused on what had troubled his previous projects: the angle of ascent. The bent pyramid had taught him that even a slight miscalculation could compromise stability, while Meidum had shown the catastrophic consequences of overambition. This time, every slope, every layer, every block placement would be calculated with precision to ensure perfection from base to apex. Surveyors measured the terrain meticulously, using plumb bobs, sighting rods, and leveling tools to achieve absolute accuracy. The foundation was checked and rechecked, reinforced where necessary to support thousands of tons of limestone. Engineers debated the optimal slope angle, weighing lessons from the bent pyramid against the principles of weight distribution and structural integrity. Their calculations were reviewed by Sneferu himself, who insisted that no detail was too small and no precaution too great. Once the precise angle was determined, laborers and craftsmen worked in disciplined harmony. Ramps were carefully positioned, stone blocks were hauled and fitted with astonishing precision, and oversight was constant. Even minor deviations were corrected immediately, as the king and his architects understood that a single misaligned block could ripple upward, threatening the entire structure. Sneferu's vigilance extended beyond engineering. He ensured the workforce remained motivated and coordinated, recognizing that human effort was as vital as stone quality. Priests conducted blessings to secure divine favor, reinforcing the sacred nature of the project. Every action, from quarrying to placement, reflected a balance of faith, skill, and determination. By perfecting the angle, Sneferu eliminated the compromises that had plagued earlier pyramids. The Red Pyramid rose steadily, a testament to learning from failure and applying knowledge with discipline. It was a triumph of foresight, measurement, and leadership, a pyramid that demonstrated that mastery is achieved not just by vision, but by precision, persistence, and the courage to perfect every detail. The desert would soon witness a monument rising flawlessly toward eternity. The Red Pyramid at Dashur slowly rose layer by layer until it became clear that Sneferu's ambition had finally been realized. Unlike his previous pyramids, this structure would not falter, bend, or collapse. It was a triumph of experience, calculation, and perseverance. a pyramid that would stand for millennia as a testament to human ingenuity and the king's unwavering vision. Every element of the Red Pyramid reflected lessons learned from past failures. The foundations were solid, the slopes precise, and the weight of the enormous limestone blocks carefully balanced. Engineers applied knowledge gained from the Meidum collapse and the bent pyramid's unusual angles, ensuring that each stone contributed to stability rather than strain. Surveyors meticulously checked alignment, connecting the pyramid to the cardinal points and the rising sun, a symbol of divine order and the king's eternal journey. The workforce, seasoned by years of labor on prior projects, moved with unmatched efficiency. Blocks were transported, aligned, and fitted with precision. Ramps were adjusted as needed, tools sharpened, and measurements double-checked. Sneferu himself supervised, walking the terraces, inspecting angles, and correcting any deviation. His presence inspired loyalty and diligence, reinforcing the sacred nature of the undertaking. When the apex was finally reached, the pyramid stood in perfect form, smooth-sided, balanced, and imposing against the horizon. Priests conducted rituals to consecrate the structure, invoking Ra and other gods to bless the king's eternal resting place. For Sneferu, the Red Pyramid represented more than engineering mastery. It was the realization of a lifelong dream, the culmination of decades of experimentation, courage, and unrelenting determination. In the desert, where countless experiments had taught harsh lessons, the Red Pyramid arose flawlessly. It was proof that vision, when paired with perseverance and wisdom, could overcome failure. Sneferu had achieved what no king before him had dared, a pyramid that truly stood, eternal in both stone and legacy. The completion of the Red Pyramid marked a turning point in Egyptian history. For the first time, a king had built a smooth-sided pyramid from start to finish, a structure that combined scale, stability, and symmetry in a way the world had never seen. Sneferu's relentless pursuit of perfection had culminated in Egypt's first true pyramid, a monument that would redefine what it meant to reach for eternity. Unlike the stepped or bent designs of his earlier attempts, the Red Pyramid rose in flawless proportions. Each layer of limestone aligned perfectly with the next, forming smooth, gleaming sides that caught the sunlight like a beacon across the desert. Its base spread wide and solid, ensuring that the enormous weight above was evenly distributed, while the interior chambers were precisely engineered to protect the king's burial and preserve his passage into the afterlife. The pyramid's construction was a triumph not only of engineering, but of vision and leadership. Sneferu had orchestrated a kingdom-wide effort, coordinating thousands of laborers, architects, engineers, and priests. Every stone transported, every ramp constructed, and every measurement taken reflected decades of learning from past failures. The disasters at Meidum and the Bent Pyramid had not deterred him. They had taught him the principles of structure, slope, and endurance. The Red Pyramid stood as more than a tomb. It was a symbol of human ambition and the power of knowledge gained through trial. It embodied Sneferu's belief that greatness required persistence, courage, and a willingness to learn from mistakes. In its smooth, balanced lines, Egypt saw the first pyramid that was both technically perfect and visually majestic. From this moment forward, Sneferu's Red Pyramid set the standard for all future constructions, including the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Egypt had entered a new era, one where stone could be shaped not only to shelter the dead, but to proclaim the eternal glory of a king who dared to dream bigger than any before him. Sneferu's Red Pyramid was not only a marvel from the outside,
It was a labyrinth of carefully designed internal chambers and passages that reflected both engineering mastery and religious purpose. Unlike earlier pyramids, whose interiors were often cramped or precarious, the Red Pyramid's chambers were spacious, structurally secure, and meticulously aligned with the king's divine journey to the afterlife. The entrance led into a descending corridor that gradually opened into a series of chambers, each built with massive limestone blocks and reinforced ceilings to withstand the immense weight above. Engineers applied lessons from the bent pyramid's stresses, ensuring that every beam, every arch, and every ceiling block transferred weight safely to the foundation. Precision was critical. A single misaligned stone could compromise the stability of the entire pyramid. Inside, the king's burial chamber was a marvel of both practicality and symbolism. Constructed from carefully fitted red limestone, it was designed to protect the pharaoh's body for eternity, while its alignment and proportions reflected the cosmic order. The corridor leading to the chamber echoed the king's spiritual journey, symbolizing his passage from mortal life to divine eternity. Priests performed sacred rituals as the chambers were prepared, invoking Ra and other gods to ensure Sneferu's safe transition to the heavens. Laborers and scribes worked tirelessly, not only constructing the chambers, but also marking them with records of measurements and techniques. Every step inside the pyramid was deliberate, reflecting the culmination of decades of innovation. The careful planning, reinforced structures, and strategic layout made the Red Pyramid both a functional tomb and a symbol of engineering genius. Walking through these passages, one could feel the scale of Sneferu's vision. The interior of the Red Pyramid was a silent testament to his determination, skill, and belief that a king's journey to eternity required both earthly precision and divine guidance. In stone, Sneferu had created a palace for the gods.
Sneferu's greatness was not measured solely by the pyramids he built, but by the extraordinary organization behind them. To create monuments that defied the limits of human labor, he transformed Egypt itself into a kingdom finely tuned for monumental construction. Every stone quarried, every worker assigned, and every ration of food distributed was part of a vast, coordinated system orchestrated by the king himself. Laborers were organized into specialized teams, each responsible for quarrying, transporting, or placing stone blocks. Some worked in the quarries cutting limestone at Tura, while others hauled massive granite blocks from Aswan, hundreds of miles away. Engineers and overseers monitored every step, ensuring that precision and technique were maintained. Sneferu's administration even accounted for seasonal cycles, mobilizing workers during the Nile's flood months when farming was impossible. This allowed the kingdom to maximize labor without compromising the people's survival. Resources were managed with equal care. Sneferu oversaw the flow of stone, timber, copper tools, and provisions. Scribes documented every shipment, recording amounts and destinations to prevent waste or delay. Villages grew around construction sites, providing housing, food, and medical care for workers, reflecting a state that functioned as efficiently as a single colossal machine. Sneferu's organizational genius extended to morale and motivation. Priests blessed the workers and invoked divine favor, while officials celebrated milestones and ensured that laborers understood the sacred purpose of their work. By combining discipline, religious devotion, and practical management, Sneferu created not just pyramids, but a workforce capable of achieving what had once seemed impossible. Through this meticulous orchestration, Sneferu proved that monumental achievement required more than vision or ambition. It demanded leadership,
planning, and the ability to mobilize an entire nation. His organizational genius became the foundation upon which Egypt's most iconic pyramids would rise, ensuring his legacy endured far beyond stone and time. The pyramids of Sneferu did not rise by magic. They were the product of thousands of skilled and disciplined workers, men and women whose labor would echo through eternity. These were the workers of eternity, artisans, quarrymen, engineers, and laborers who transformed raw stone into monuments of divine ambition. Each person, whether chiseling limestone at Tura or hauling granite from Aswan, played a critical role in turning Sneferu's vision into reality. Laborers were organized into teams with precise duties. Quarry workers extracted massive blocks, shaping them to exact dimensions with copper tools. Haulers and sledge operators transported the stones across miles of desert, carefully lubricating sand with water to ease friction. Craftsmen chiseled surfaces, smoothed edges, and prepared blocks to fit seamlessly into the pyramid's structure. Meanwhile, engineers oversaw measurements, alignment, and slope, ensuring stability and perfection at every stage. No detail was too small, no misalignment tolerated. Sneferu's oversight was constant. He visited the construction sites regularly, inspecting progress, guiding teams, and reinforcing the sacred nature of their work. Priests accompanied him, blessing the workers and invoking Ra and other gods, reminding them that their labor was both practical and divine. In this way, building a pyramid was as much a spiritual act as a physical one. The laborers endured harsh conditions, desert heat, heavy stone, and long hours, but their effort was framed as an honor. They were participants in eternity, contributing to monuments that would outlast generations and speak for the king's divine rule. Through sweat, skill, and unyielding determination, the pyramids rose. Sneferu's vision was realized not just through kingship or ambition, but through the dedication of these workers. They were the unseen force behind Egypt's most enduring achievements, the true architects of eternity. Sneferu's pyramids required more than labor. They demanded resources of extraordinary scale, much of which came from distant lands. Egypt itself was rich in limestone, clay, and reeds, but granite, fine copper, and exotic timber had to be brought from far-flung regions. The king's ambition transformed trade, transport, and diplomacy, turning wealth from afar into the raw material for eternity. Granite, essential for inner chambers and structural reinforcements, was quarried at Aswan, nearly 600 miles south of Dashur. Transporting these enormous stones required ingenuity. Workers hauled the blocks onto massive barges, floated down the Nile during high water, and then dragged them across desert ramps to their precise locations. Every shipment had to be meticulously timed and coordinated. Delays could halt construction and jeopardize the entire project. Timber, vital for scaffolding, sledges, and construction tools, arrived from distant oases and even neighboring regions. Copper, used for chisels, drills, and saws, came from the Sinai and the eastern desert. Scribes kept detailed records of each shipment, ensuring that no material was wasted and that resources were allocated efficiently. Sneferu's administrators monitored every stage, balancing the enormous logistical demands with the needs of the workforce and the state. These distant resources were more than practical necessities. They were symbols of the king's reach and Egypt's prosperity. By bringing stone, wood, and metal from distant lands, Sneferu demonstrated that his authority extended beyond the Nile Valley. Trade routes flourished, diplomatic ties strengthened, and the flow of wealth reinforced the state's ability to undertake monumental construction projects. In the end, the Red Pyramid and the Bent Pyramid were not only feats of engineering, they were networks of human effort, resource management, and far-reaching trade. Sneferu's vision turned the wealth of distant lands into stone monuments, proving that the power of a king could harness the riches of the known world to build for eternity.
Sneferu was more than an architect of stone. He was a warrior king, defender of Egypt, and master of strategy. While his pyramids reached for the heavens, his armies secured the borders, subdued rebellious regions, and protected the kingdom's wealth and people. Military might and monumental ambition were two sides of the same coin in his reign, both demonstrating power, authority, and the reach of the king. From the deserts to the Nile Delta, Sneferu's forces were organized with precision. Infantry, archers, and charioteers were trained not only to fight, but to serve as an extension of the king's will. Patrols monitored trade routes, quelling bandits who threatened the supply of stone, timber, or grain. Fortifications were strengthened in strategic regions, signaling to allies and enemies alike that Egypt was under the rule of a capable, vigilant king. Sneferu also understood the importance of diplomacy backed by force. Tributes from neighboring territories reinforced loyalty while expanding Egypt's influence. These campaigns were not mere conquest, they secured resources, stabilized trade, and ensured that his monumental projects could proceed without disruption. The wealth that flowed from these campaigns funded quarries, laborers, and the materials needed for his pyramids, linking military success directly to architectural achievement. Even in battle, Sneferu led by example. Ancient accounts describe a king who observed tactics personally, guided his generals, and inspired soldiers through courage and decisiveness. His reputation as both visionary and warrior spread throughout the Nile Valley, deterring potential challengers and reinforcing the divine authority of the pharaoh. Sneferu's military prowess complemented his architectural genius. Every pyramid, every stone, every laborer depended on the stability his armies provided. In protecting Egypt and projecting power beyond its borders, he ensured that his kingdom was not only a land of monumental achievement, but also one of security and order. Sneferu was the embodiment of a pharaoh, a ruler whose strength extended from the battlefield to the building site.
Sneferu's power was not only measured by stone or armies, but by his sacred relationship with the gods. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was more than a king. He was a divine intermediary, chosen by the gods to maintain Ma'at, the balance of the universe. Every pyramid, every temple, and every ritual reinforced this sacred authority, linking Sneferu's earthly reign to the eternal cosmos. From the very beginning of his reign, Sneferu understood that the favor of the gods was essential. Priests conducted daily rituals in his name, offering incense, prayers, and symbolic gifts to Ra, the sun god, and other deities who oversaw life, death, and the Nile's cycles. Temples across Egypt were maintained, and festivals celebrated his connection to divine power. The pyramids themselves were sacred monuments, designed not only as tombs, but as stairways for the king's soul to ascend to the heavens. The alignment of the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid with celestial bodies emphasized this divine link. Surveyors and astronomers ensured that the structures faced the cardinal points and caught the sun's rays at key moments, reflecting Sneferu's connection to Ra. Inside, burial chambers were constructed with precise geometry,
symbolizing the harmony between mortal and divine. Every detail, from stone placement to corridor orientation, was infused with religious meaning, reinforcing the king's sacred role. Sneferu's kingship was both spiritual and practical. By embodying the will of the gods, he commanded loyalty and inspired obedience, uniting Egypt under a common purpose. His monuments became visible declarations of divine authority, while rituals and offerings reminded his people that their king was chosen to guide them, protect the land, and ensure cosmic balance. In this way, Sneferu's reign was more than political power. It was a living connection between gods and men. His pyramid stood as eternal proof that the pharaoh's duty was sacred and that Egypt itself thrived under divine guidance. For Sneferu, pyramids were not just monuments. They were intricate machines of resurrection, designed to ensure the king's eternal life. In the Egyptian worldview, death was not the end, but a transition to the afterlife, a journey that required careful preparation and protection. The pyramid was the ultimate instrument of this transformation, a carefully engineered vessel to carry the pharaoh's soul from the mortal realm to eternity. Every aspect of the bent pyramid and the red pyramid was designed with resurrection in mind. The smooth, angled sides symbolized the pharaoh's ascent to the heavens, guiding his soul upward toward the sun god Ra. Inside, burial chambers were built with precision, constructed to safeguard the king's body, treasures, and sacred texts. Corridors and passageways were carefully aligned, not only for structural stability, but also to create a symbolic journey, echoing the pharaoh's passage from death to divine immortality. Sneferu's architects understood that the pyramid was more than stone. It was a conduit for spiritual transformation. The orientation of the pyramids to the cardinal points and the sun reinforced this connection, linking the king's mortal remains to cosmic forces. Rituals performed by priests further activated the pyramid's power, invoking divine protection and blessing the king's journey. Even the placement of the king's sarcophagus, hidden deep within the structure, reflected careful consideration of sacred geometry and symbolic meaning. In this sense, Sneferu's pyramids were resurrection machines, physical structures and spiritual instruments combined. They transformed labor, stone, and geometry into a mechanism capable of granting immortality. Every block, every angle, every corridor was part of a larger plan, ensuring that the pyramid builder king would not simply rest in the desert sands, but rise eternally among the gods. Through these monuments, Sneferu achieved what all kings desired, a chance to live forever, his soul ascending, unbound by mortality, immortalized in stone.
Behind every great king stands a family that shapes his legacy, and Sneferu was no exception. Though history often focuses on his pyramids, Sneferu's family life was intertwined with his reign, providing both political stability and continuity for Egypt's future. His queens, children, and close relatives played crucial roles in maintaining the dynasty and ensuring that his monumental achievements would endure beyond his lifetime. Sneferu had several wives, each strategically connected to powerful families or noble lineages. These marriages strengthened alliances across Egypt, securing loyalty from regional leaders and integrating distant provinces under the king's influence. Among these queens, Hetepheres I is remembered as particularly influential. She would later become the mother of Khufu, the pharaoh who would build the Great Pyramid. Sneferu's careful arrangement of marriages ensured that his bloodline would remain central to Egypt's ruling elite.
Children were not only heirs, but also symbols of divine continuity. Sons were trained in leadership, military skills, and administration from a young age, learning both the responsibilities and the rituals of kingship. Daughters often married into other noble families, reinforcing political alliances and spreading Sneferu's influence across the Nile Valley. The family was thus both a personal and political institution, reflecting the king's authority and extending it through generations. Within the royal court, Sneferu's family participated in religious ceremonies, official events, and temple dedications. They were present when rituals blessed the pyramids or celebrated the king's achievements, reinforcing the idea that the pharaoh's power was divinely sanctioned and hereditary. Through his family, Sneferu secured Egypt's stability and the continuation of his vision. His children and queens were not merely companions, they were integral to the kingdom's governance, the preservation of dynastic power, and the enduring legacy of the pyramid builder king. In stone and bloodline alike, Sneferu's influence would live on for generations. Sneferu's legacy extended far beyond his own reign, for it shaped the life of the boy who would follow him, Khufu. Growing up in the shadow of the pyramid builder king, Khufu witnessed firsthand the scale of ambition, the demands of leadership, and the extraordinary achievements that defined his father's rule. From an early age, he was immersed in a world of monumental construction, divine rituals, and political authority. Khufu watched as massive limestone blocks were quarried, transported, and fitted into perfect alignment, marveling at the sheer organization and coordination required. He saw laborers and engineers move as one, guided by his father's vision, learning that a great king's power depended as much on planning and discipline as it did on wealth or armies. These lessons in leadership, logistics, and innovation were as vital as any formal education or royal tutoring. He also witnessed Sneferu's interactions with priests and nobles, seeing how the king balanced spiritual authority with political power. Religious ceremonies at the pyramids reinforced the idea that kingship was sacred, that Pharaoh was the mediator between gods and men. Khufu absorbed these lessons, understanding that his own future role would demand not only wisdom, but divine legitimacy. At home, Khufu learned diplomacy, the management of estates, and the importance of family alliances. He observed the strategic marriages of queens and the training of princes and princesses, seeing how bloodlines could secure loyalty and continuity for generations. Growing up under Sneferu's watchful eye, Khufu inherited more than a throne. He inherited knowledge, ambition, and a standard of excellence that would shape his reign. Every block laid, every ceremony performed, every decision made by Sneferu became a lesson etched into the young prince's mind. In the shadow of his father's pyramids, Khufu learned to dream even higher, preparing to surpass the achievements of the Great Pyramid builder king. Sneferu's reign was remarkable not only for the monumental pyramids he built, but also for the peace and stability he maintained throughout Egypt. Unlike many rulers who spent their time defending borders or quelling rebellions, Sneferu enjoyed decades of relative tranquility, allowing him to focus on innovation, administration, and the spiritual life of the kingdom. This era of peace became the foundation for Egypt's prosperity and the flourishing of monumental architecture. Borders were secure thanks to Sneferu's earlier military campaigns and strategic alliances. Trade routes along the Nile and across neighboring territories remained open, bringing in resources, wealth, and exotic materials necessary for pyramid construction. Security and order allowed farmers to work their lands without interruption,
providing the kingdom with abundant grain, livestock, and provisions to support both the population and monumental projects. Internally, Sneferu promoted strong governance and efficient administration. Provincial officials were appointed to oversee taxation, resource distribution, and labor organization, ensuring that projects ran smoothly and corruption was minimized. The king's ability to combine authority with fairness earned loyalty from both nobles and common citizens, strengthening Egypt's unity. The peaceful environment also allowed culture and religion to thrive. Temples were maintained, priests performed elaborate rituals, and festivals celebrated the gods and the pharaoh's divine role. Artisans, scribes, and craftsmen could dedicate time to honing their skills, producing exquisite works for temples and monuments. This tranquility was not passive, it was actively maintained by Sneferu's wisdom, diplomacy, and foresight. By securing Egypt from external threats and nurturing internal stability, he created a kingdom capable of unprecedented achievements. In this peaceful era, laborers could build the bent pyramid and the red pyramid. Priests could perform sacred rituals uninterrupted, and citizens could live under a ruler whose vision extended far beyond the immediate challenges of his time. Sneferu's peaceful reign demonstrated that greatness is not only measured by monuments in stone, but by the stability and prosperity that allow a civilization to reach its full potential.
Long after Sneferu's death, his memory endured in the hearts, minds, and stone monuments of Egypt. Generations of Egyptians looked upon his pyramids not only as tombs, but as symbols of a king who transformed the nation, combining ambition, ingenuity, and divine authority into a legacy that would shape their civilization for centuries. Sneferu was remembered as the pyramid builder king, the ruler who dared to challenge the limits of engineering and imagination. The Meidum Pyramid, though partially collapsed, was recognized as a bold experiment. The bent pyramid stood as a testament to adaptation and courage, proof that a wise king could turn mistakes into lasting lessons. And the red pyramid, perfectly constructed, smooth-sided, and monumental, became the standard against which all future pyramids would be measured, a symbol of technical mastery and visionary leadership. Stories of Sneferu's reign circulated among priests, scribes, and common people alike. They told of a king who combined strength with wisdom, who balanced military might, administrative skill, and spiritual authority. His peaceful rule, which allowed trade, culture, and agriculture to flourish, was praised alongside his architectural achievements. Children learned that his monuments were more than tombs. They were bridges between mortals and gods, designed to preserve life, power, and divine order beyond death. Sneferu's memory shaped the reign of his son Khufu, who inherited not only the throne, but also a tradition of ambitious construction. The techniques, lessons, and organization developed under Sneferu's guidance enabled Egypt to reach new heights with the Great Pyramid, ensuring that his influence endured even as time moved forward. Centuries later, travelers, historians, and pharaohs alike would gaze upon Sneferu's pyramids and see more than stone. They would see a king whose vision, courage, and wisdom were immortal. In the memory of Egypt, Sneferu had achieved the greatest triumph of all, eternal legacy. After decades of ruling, building, and guiding Egypt through an era of prosperity, Sneferu's life eventually drew to a close. The pyramid builder king, whose hands and vision had shaped the desert into monuments of eternity, now faced the one certainty that even kings could not escape: death. Yet, even in this final chapter, his legacy endured.
cemented in stone, memory, and the hearts of his people. Sneferu passed away surrounded by the signs of his life's work. The pyramids at Meidum, Dashur, and the Red Pyramid loomed on the horizon, silent witnesses to the labor, genius, and ambition of their creator. Priests performed sacred rites, chanting prayers to guide the king's soul into the afterlife, ensuring that Ra and the other gods would welcome him among the divine. His burial was carefully orchestrated, reflecting the same precision and reverence that had defined his pyramid constructions. For Egypt, the death of Sneferu was both a moment of mourning and a moment of reflection. Officials, nobles, and citizens remembered a king who had balanced ambition with wisdom, labor with devotion, and earthly authority with divine purpose. Tales of his innovations, military campaigns, peaceful governance, and monumental achievements spread throughout the Nile Valley, becoming part of the oral and written record of Egyptian history. Even as Egypt prepared for the reign of his son, Khufu, Sneferu's influence remained ever present. The techniques, lessons, and vision he had cultivated would guide the next generation of pharaohs, enabling the construction of the Great Pyramid and other architectural marvels. Sneferu's death marked the end of a life filled with achievement, but it was not an end in the true sense. Through his pyramids, his family, and the memory of his reign, the king who had transformed stone into eternity achieved a form of immortality. In Egypt, Sneferu the builder would never truly die. By the end of Sneferu's reign, the desert of Dashur and the lands of Meidum bore witness to a feat unmatched in Egyptian history. 3 pyramids, each a milestone in architectural innovation, all born of one king's vision. Together, they told the story of ambition, experimentation, and ultimate mastery, forming a legacy that would shape the future of Egypt for centuries. The Meidum Pyramid, though partially collapsed in later years, represented the first bold attempt at a smooth-sided monument. Its towering layers were a test, revealing the limits of early construction methods and teaching lessons in engineering that would inform every pyramid to follow. Sneferu's willingness to learn from Meidum's flaws demonstrated a rare combination of courage and humility, turning failure into knowledge. The bent pyramid at Dashur marked the next phase of experimentation. Its lower sections rose steeply, daring the impossible, until mid-construction adjustments softened the angle. The resulting bent shape was a living record of adaptation, a compromise that preserved both vision and stability. Though unconventional, it showcased Sneferu's innovative spirit and his ability to respond to challenges with intelligence and decisiveness. Finally, the Red Pyramid, the first true smooth-sided pyramid, stood as the crowning achievement of Sneferu's architectural journey. Perfectly proportioned, structurally secure, and aligned with cosmic precision, it combined the lessons of Meidum and Dashur into a triumph of engineering. It was a symbol of perseverance, of mastery over both stone and human labor, and of a king whose vision transcended his lifetime. Together, the 3 pyramids were more than monuments. They were a narrative of Sneferu's reign. They reflected his relentless pursuit of perfection, his ability to adapt, and his profound understanding of the divine and earthly forces that governed Egypt. In stone, the pyramid builder king left a unified legacy, a record of innovation, resilience, and eternal ambition that would inspire generations of pharaohs to come. Sneferu's pioneering work with pyramids paved the way for the next era of monumental construction, setting the stage for the most famous site in all of Egypt, Giza. His experiments at Meidum, the Bent Pyramid, and the Red Pyramid were not merely isolated achievements. They were lessons, templates, and warnings that guided future pharaohs. Without Sneferu's vision, the Great Pyramids of Giza might never have risen. Every stone laid under Sneferu taught a principle of geometry, engineering, or logistics that would later be perfected by his son, Khufu. The collapse of Meidum demonstrated the dangers of over-steep slopes. The bent pyramid showed the importance of adaptation and reinforced planning. The red pyramid proved that smooth-sided perfection was possible with careful measurement, resource management, and workforce coordination. Khufu would inherit not just a kingdom, but a full set of architectural blueprints for success. The road to Giza was also a road of inspiration. Sneferu had shown that the Nile Valley could support monumental projects, that labor could be organized on an unprecedented scale, and that divine symbolism could be embedded into every block. Engineers, architects, and laborers trained under his reign carried knowledge, skills, and traditions that would directly influence the construction of the Great Pyramid. Temples, quarries, and logistical networks established by Sneferu became essential infrastructure for Khufu's audacious project. Moreover, Sneferu's insistence on precision, alignment with the cardinal points, and integration of spiritual symbolism ensured that future pyramids would be both technically brilliant and spiritually resonant. His innovations in ramps, workforce organization, and material transportation created a foundation on which Egypt's greatest architectural wonders could rise. The path from Dashur to Giza was more than physical. It was intellectual and spiritual. Sneferu's pyramids were the lessons, the laboratories, and the warnings. They paved the way for the Great Pyramid, ensuring that Egypt's legacy of stone, ambition, and eternity would reach its most glorious expression at Giza.
Sneferu's journey as a pyramid builder was a testament to the power of learning from failure. Each structure he commissioned, Meidum, the bent pyramid, and finally the red pyramid, was a step in an evolutionary process that transformed mistakes into mastery. From the crumbling stones of Meidum to the awkward slope of Dashur, Sneferu's ambition was relentless, and his ability to adapt was extraordinary. The collapse of the Meidum Pyramid, though tragic, provided critical lessons in weight distribution, foundation stability, and slope management. Engineers and laborers studied the failure meticulously, understanding how over-steep angles could compromise even the mightiest stone structure. Rather than discourage the king, this early setback fueled his determination. He approached the bent pyramid with daring ingenuity, experimenting with angles and techniques, aware that risk and innovation were inseparable. When cracks appeared during the bent pyramid's construction, Sneferu acted decisively, adjusting slopes mid-project and reinforcing critical areas. This pragmatic approach turned a potential disaster into a learning opportunity. It was here that he perfected the delicate balance between ambition and caution, understanding that mastery required not only vision, but the wisdom to respond to unforeseen challenges. All of these lessons culminated in the Red Pyramid. Every calculation, every foundation, and every aligned stone reflected the knowledge gained from prior failures. The result was perfection, smooth sides, stable slopes, and a structure that could endure the millennia. Sneferu had transformed trial and error into an art form, demonstrating that greatness is rarely immediate. It is forged through persistence, adaptation, and courage. From failure to perfection, Sneferu's journey illustrates a universal truth. Mistakes are not endpoints, but stepping stones toward excellence. Through his pyramids, the pyramid builder king immortalized not only himself,
but the very principle that perseverance and learning can turn ambition into enduring legacy.
Thousands of years after Sneferu's reign, the deserts of Egypt held silent testimony to his genius. The pyramids he built, Meidum, the Bent Pyramid, and the Red Pyramid, stood as weathered but enduring monuments, waiting to reveal their secrets to the modern world. Archaeologists, historians, and explorers began piecing together the life and achievements of the pyramid builder king, uncovering evidence of his vision, labor, and ingenuity that had been buried beneath centuries of sand, erosion, and myth. Early excavations at Meidum revealed the collapsed layers and inner structures that told a story of trial, experimentation, and adaptation. Researchers marveled at the scale of construction and the lessons hidden in what had once seemed like failure. These ruins illustrated the risks Sneferu had taken and the innovative solutions he developed to overcome architectural challenges, providing invaluable insight into the origins of pyramid engineering. At Dahshur, the Bent Pyramid and Red Pyramid became central to understanding Sneferu's evolution as a builder. Archaeologists documented the unusual change in angle at the Bent Pyramid, confirming ancient theories about mid-construction adaptations. The Red Pyramid, smooth-sided and perfectly proportioned, revealed techniques for aligning with the cardinal points, managing massive labor forces, and transporting enormous blocks across vast distances. Every chamber, passageway, and foundation told a story of precision, planning, and devotion to both earthly and divine purposes. Through modern archaeology, Sneferu's legacy was reconstructed not as myth or legend, but as tangible history. Tools, inscriptions, and structural analysis painted a vivid picture of a king whose vision, determination, and ingenuity reshaped Egypt and laid the groundwork for the Great Pyramid at Giza. The rediscovery of Sneferu allowed the world to witness the genius of a ruler whose ambition turned stone into eternity, proving that even millennia later, the influence of the pyramid builder king could still be felt, studied, and celebrated.
Today, the Bent Pyramid at Dahshur stands as one of Egypt's most fascinating monuments, a visible record of experimentation and adaptation from the era of Sneferu. Unlike the perfectly smooth pyramids that would follow, the Bent Pyramid's unusual shape, steep lower slopes that suddenly flatten near the top, captures the imagination of visitors and scholars alike. It is a tangible connection to the early days of pyramid construction and the bold vision of a king determined to reach the heavens. Despite its unique form, the pyramid has endured over 4,500 years. Weathering, erosion, and the passage of time have left their mark on the limestone blocks, yet the structure remains remarkably intact. Its preservation allows archaeologists to study Sneferu's methods. The change in slope demonstrates his ability to respond to structural challenges mid-construction, and the precise placement of massive stones reveals a level of planning and skill that was revolutionary for its time. Today, the Bent Pyramid attracts thousands of tourists, historians, and Egyptologists who seek to understand the origins of pyramid engineering. Visitors can explore the lower chambers, which were among the first attempts at internal corridors and burial rooms in a smooth-sided pyramid. Climbing the exterior, they observe the steep lower angle contrasted with the gentler upper slope, a visual lesson in both ambition and adaptation. Beyond its physical form, the Bent Pyramid serves as a symbol of human ingenuity and perseverance. It tells a story of risk, failure, and innovation, the hallmarks of Sneferu's reign. Modern technology, including 3D mapping and structural analysis, allow researchers to uncover even more details about its construction, reinforcing the king's reputation as a master builder. Standing in the shadow of the Bent Pyramid,
one can almost hear the echoes of the laborers' efforts and feel the vision of a king who dared to dream bigger than anyone before him. It remains a testament to experimentation, resilience, and the eternal pursuit of perfection. Today, the Red Pyramid at Dashur stands as a crowning achievement of Sneferu's architectural legacy, a monument that has endured for over 4,500 years. Its smooth red limestone sides rise steadily from the desert, perfectly proportioned and structurally sound, a testament to the lessons learned from earlier experiments at Meidum and the Bent Pyramid. Unlike its predecessors, the Red Pyramid represents both ambition and mastery, the culmination of a king's decades-long pursuit of perfection. Visitors to the site are struck immediately by its scale. The pyramid's broad base supports an immense height, yet the gentle, precise slope ensures stability that has allowed the structure to survive millennia. Archaeologists have noted the careful alignment with the cardinal points, reflecting Sneferu's intent to link his tomb to cosmic order. Inside, the chambers and passageways reveal meticulous engineering, thick limestone walls, carefully aligned corridors, and a burial chamber that anticipates the grandeur of Khufu's Great Pyramid. The Red Pyramid also provides insight into Sneferu's organizational genius. Every stone, corridor, and chamber reflects the coordination of thousands of laborers, craftsmen, and overseers. Modern research shows how quarrying, transport, and construction were carefully synchronized, illustrating a level of logistical planning that was unprecedented for the time. Today, the Red Pyramid attracts scholars, tourists, and engineers alike, serving as both a historical treasure and a symbol of human ingenuity. It is studied not just for its scale, but for the lessons it holds in construction, problem-solving, and leadership. Standing at its base, one can imagine the determination of Sneferu and his workforce laboring under the desert sun to build a monument designed to last for eternity. The Red Pyramid remains more than a tomb. It is a timeless testament to Sneferu's vision, resilience, and mastery, a monument where ambition meets perfection in stone.
Sneferu's reign left an indelible mark on the generations that followed, shaping not only the architecture of Egypt, but also the expectations of kingship itself. Through his innovations, lessons learned from failures, and monumental achievements, he set a standard that would guide his son Khufu and later pharaohs, ensuring that Egypt's pyramids would reach unprecedented scale and perfection. The techniques developed under Sneferu's guidance, precise measurements, slope calculations, internal chamber design, and workforce coordination, became the blueprint for future construction. Khufu inherited this knowledge and expanded upon it, culminating in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Every block in Giza reflects lessons first discovered in Meidum, tested at the Bent Pyramid, and perfected at the Red Pyramid. Sneferu's influence extended beyond his lifetime. Through engineering, leadership, and spiritual vision, he shaped the expectations of what a pharaoh could accomplish. His pyramids were not only achievements of stone, they were lessons etched into history, guiding Egypt's rulers to pursue ambition with knowledge, precision, and reverence for eternity. In this way, Sneferu became the foundation upon which the greatest monuments in human history were built.
The relationship between Sneferu and his son Khufu is often framed as a passing of the torch, yet it also represents a fascinating comparison between two of Egypt's most ambitious rulers. Sneferu, the pyramid builder king, had spent decades experimenting, learning from failures, and mastering the art of monumental construction. Khufu inherited not only a throne, but also the knowledge, techniques, and expectations forged by his father's groundbreaking projects.
In many ways, Sneferu set the stage for Khufu's legendary reign, but the son would take ambition even further. Sneferu's pyramids, while remarkable, were also laboratories of trial and adaptation. Meidum collapsed, the bent pyramid's angles were adjusted mid-construction, and only the red pyramid achieved perfection. Khufu, by contrast, benefited from these lessons. With a deep understanding of slope, weight distribution, workforce management, and material logistics, he was able to plan the Great Pyramid of Giza with unprecedented precision from the start. Where Sneferu had experimented, Khufu could perfect. Yet the differences extended beyond architecture. Sneferu's reign balanced innovation with diplomacy, peace, and consolidation. He was both a builder and a statesman, carefully organizing labor, resources, and religious rituals. Khufu, however, is often remembered as more authoritarian, focusing intensely on monumental construction, centralizing power, and leaving less evidence of the social and administrative balance his father maintained. Despite these contrasts, the connection between father and son is undeniable. Sneferu provided the knowledge, techniques, and inspiration. Khufu amplified them, achieving what his father had envisioned but had only partially realized. Together, they transformed Egypt's desert into a landscape of eternal stone, linking ambition, mastery, and divine authority across 2 generations. In the story of Sneferu and Khufu, we see both continuity and escalation, the foundation of Egypt's greatest architectural achievements and the evolution of the pharaoh's vision from experimentation to perfection.
Sneferu's reign marked the dawn of a new era in Egyptian history, the Pyramid Age. Before him, tombs were modest mastabas, flat-roofed structures that honored the dead but did little to impress posterity. Sneferu's vision transformed funerary architecture, turning burial monuments into colossal expressions of power, divinity, and ambition. He was the first pharaoh to dedicate decades of his reign to perfecting the pyramid, laying the foundation for a tradition that would define Egypt for centuries. The journey began with experimentation. The Meidum Pyramid, though flawed, introduced the concept of the smooth-sided structure, hinting at what was possible when human scale attempted to reach the heavens. The bent pyramid demonstrated adaptation and resilience, revealing that monumental projects required flexibility, foresight, and careful problem-solving. These experiments culminated in the Red Pyramid, the first true pyramid in history, perfectly proportioned, structurally secure, and aligned with celestial order. Sneferu had not only mastered stone and geometry, but had also established the symbolic language of pyramids as stairways to eternity. With these achievements, Sneferu inaugurated the Pyramid Age, a period in which pharaohs would dedicate immense resources, labor, and ingenuity to construct monuments that reflected their divine authority. His pyramids became both political statements and spiritual instruments, communicating the pharaoh's power to subjects and the gods alike. They were designed to endure, to protect the king's body, and to symbolize the eternal order of Egypt. Sneferu's innovations inspired subsequent rulers, most notably Khufu, who would surpass his father with the Great Pyramid of Giza. Yet it was Sneferu who turned the concept of monumental tombs into a defining feature of Egyptian civilization. By combining ambition, skill, and vision, he created an age where stone could become immortal, and where the desert itself would bear witness to the glory of the pharaoh. The Pyramid Age had begun, and Sneferu stood at its dawn, the master architect of eternity. Sneferu's pyramids were more than monuments. They were declarations of a king's desire to achieve eternity. Each block of limestone,
Each precisely aligned corridor and each carefully calculated slope was a testament to a vision that stretched beyond life itself. For Sneferu, building pyramids was not merely an act of construction, it was an exercise in immortality, a way to leave a permanent mark upon the world and ensure his soul would ascend to the divine realm. The Red Pyramid, in particular, exemplifies this pursuit of eternity. Its smooth sides, solid foundation, and perfectly aligned chambers reflected centuries of accumulated knowledge and careful experimentation. Unlike the Bent Pyramid or Meidum, it was free of compromise, representing Sneferu's mastery over both material and method. Every detail was intended to preserve his body, protect his treasures, and guide his soul toward the heavens, bridging the mortal world and the divine. Even the laborers, engineers, and priests who participated in the construction contributed to this eternal purpose. The coordinated efforts of thousands of people were not just acts of duty, but acts of devotion, helping transform raw stone into a spiritual vessel. Sneferu understood that true permanence required more than size. It required precision, foresight, and alignment with cosmic forces. Through these pyramids, Sneferu achieved a form of immortality that transcended time. Millennia later, travelers, scholars, and Egyptians alike would stand at their base and feel the enduring presence of a king who sought to master both life and death. In stone, Sneferu wrote his name across history. In stone, he reached for eternity. The desert sands could erode, storms could batter, yet the vision of the pyramid builder king remained unbroken, a timeless reminder that human ambition, skill, and devotion can create monuments capable of defying the ages. As the sun set over the deserts of Dashur, casting long shadows across the Red Pyramid, the story of Sneferu, the pyramid builder king, came full circle. His reign was more than a period of construction. It was a testament to vision, perseverance, and the pursuit of perfection. Through decades of triumphs and trials, Sneferu transformed the landscape of Egypt and laid the foundation for a civilization that would forever associate kingship with monumental ambition. The journey from Meidum to the Bent Pyramid and finally to the Red Pyramid illustrates the evolution of knowledge and mastery. Each pyramid represents a lesson. Meidum taught caution, the Bent Pyramid taught adaptation, and the Red Pyramid taught perfection. Together, they chronicle a king's relentless dedication to innovation, showing that failure was never an endpoint, but a stepping stone toward greatness. Sneferu's ability to learn, adapt, and inspire thousands of workers underscores the combination of leadership, wisdom, and ambition required to achieve the extraordinary. Sneferu's influence extended far beyond stone and labor. He shaped the spiritual, political, and cultural life of Egypt, ensuring that his pyramids were not just tombs, but stairways to eternity, symbols of divine authority, and expressions of cosmic order. His son, Khufu, and subsequent pharaohs inherited not only techniques and architectural knowledge, but also a vision of what Egyptian kingship could accomplish, melding ambition with precision, devotion, and eternal legacy. Standing before these monuments today, one can feel the echo of a ruler who dared to dream bigger than any before him. Sneferu's pyramids are silent teachers, whispering lessons of courage, persistence, and the desire to reach beyond the ordinary. His greatest achievement was not merely the pyramids themselves, but the enduring proof that vision, when paired with determination and ingenuity, can achieve immortality. If you enjoyed this story of Sneferu and the rise of Egypt's pyramids, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts.
Sneferu's legacy remains eternal, etched in stone, etched in history, and etched into the very spirit of Egypt.